Digital ladies breaking the chain, rising in crypto, we're changing the game. Crypto frontier, we're claiming our space. Not your keys, not your crypto, know your place. Unscripted, we're bold, we're free. Melissa, Keda, Lady K, and Digital, come ride this wave. Digital wealth, we're here to pay.
Crypto nights, we're lighting a spark. As we ignite now, we're setting the mark.
Safety first, we're keeping it tight. Blockchain power, we're shining the light. Unscripted, we're bold, we're free. Melissa, Keda, Lady K, and Digital, come ride this wave.
Good evening. Welcome to Digital Ladies Unscripted. How are you doing this evening, guys?
Excellent.
Excellent. So tonight, guys, there's a lot of communication going back and forth over ISO 20022. What is it? It's an international standard that tells every bank, payment app, and yes, some blockchains exactly how to write and read payment instructions so that nothing ever gets lost in the translation again. It's been 20 years in the making. The ISO 20022 standard is a game changer for the financial system, particularly for messaging and data exchange. And being that it has been such a heated debate over, particularly in the last 3 years, you have a lot of people screaming from the rooftops that it's a really big deal. And, you know, we're going to make a lot of money now if our token is ISO 2022 compliant and all of that sort of stuff. And I thought it would be appropriate for us to address these questions and kind of dive in and give our thoughts and research on it and see where it takes us, where this conversation takes us. What do you guys think?
Let's go.
Let's go. We've got some folks in the chat. I did want to mention, we always have our silver days. Get to the chat, but who else do we got in here, Keda?
So we've got Ed Franslowski. We have the 589 Chicken. Miss Stephanie is in the house. So we're starting to get a couple, 2-3 people, and it looks like we've got 27 people currently watching across all of our different platforms, IMU TV here on YouTube, as well as on the X app. So we've got some folks rolling up in the spot.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I have to say, for me, being an accounting person, ISO 2022 or 20022, it kind of strikes me a little different than maybe some of the hopium people that think it's tied to price, which I don't think that it's tied to price. But what I do think is that it is a very important standard upgrade to the current way that we move money around the world. It's an archaic system that we deal with now. And there's a few key reasons why I thought it was important. I researched this back in July when the first bout of arguments was going around talking about whether it was important or not. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized what a game changer it is for accounting purposes in general, in my opinion. And so what I found is that it provides richer data and interoperability because it uses a standardized XML-based format that's going to allow people to use a more detailed and structured data within the financial messages. And so it's going to enable banks and financial institutions, even those that have different systems, to be able to communicate back and forth seamlessly, which I think is a big deal. I think that part alone is a big deal. It's also going to enhance automation The standard structured data supports straight through processing. They call it STP. And that means that payments and transactions can automatically be processed and posted to accounts with minimal manual intervention. And that's going to reduce errors and delays. And again, that was my ding, ding, ding accounting moment, thinking about that. And another good point, and there's two more here, and then I'll push it off to one of you guys. It's going to improve transparency and compliance. So because there's going to be more room for metadata, which that would be your payment reference, your remittance information. The ISO 20022 is going to enable better tracking, reconciliation, and reporting, which then would help the regulatory compliance and anti-money laundering efforts. So just even thinking about audits, being able to track those payments, where they went, because it's going to be more of an automated type of system. And then it's also support for modern day payment systems. So it's going to facilitate faster, more efficient cross-border and real-time payments by carrying all of this comprehensive information, which is going to make it easier to integrate with new technologies like blockchain or digital currencies. So, and we all know we're transitioning from the old system to the new system. And so overall, my opinion is ISO 20022 is the foundation for modernizing financial systems. That's going to make it faster and more transparent and globally compatible. So before we move on, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Does that make sense?
How?
What's that?
Oh, can I explain how and why it does that? So
sure, absolutely.
Okay, so first of all, like the old MT, I think is what it was called, old MT system. It was limited to how much data you can send, and it was text, right? And it wasn't structured. So every bank had like made their own or sent their data in the way they decided to structure it. So when it got to where it was going, it was up to that bank to then figure out what that message was and what it was.
Time.
Right? So that created a lot of like misinterpretation. There's a lot of failure rates with the SWIFT system messaging, right? Yep. ISO actually, did you know it's a Greek word for equal? ISOS. And
I didn't.
Oh, wow,
yes.
That's great.
And ISO is actually an international organization of standards, right? And so like there's actually an ISO, standard for our phones, for the date and time, and for our computers and everything like that. So they've been using the SWIFT MT system since the 70s. So this was supposed to say, okay, not a limit. It's structured. Everybody's using the same standard. So now we can understand each other. You know what I mean? And that's what it's doing to the SWIFT system.
I absolutely 100% agree. And that is why, when I dove into it, and I'll admit, when it first started floating around several years ago, probably 3 years ago, and you had the people like flip the switch and we're going to go on to ISO 2022. And, I was like, oh yeah, rah, and then I started looking at it deeper and I was like, oh man, now I do think that, in a roundabout way, eventually it will have an impact. Why? Because it's the step to global adoption. Okay. For us to start transitioning over into using digital currencies, right? But in the interim, for that, it's going to make a lot of changes even beyond that. Like I said, for the accounting purposes of it, okay, you've got payments that are coming in, and there's usually someone on the other end, unless your systems are talking directly the exact same language where I send you and it dumps right into where it needs to go, right? Like companies have inner office or whatever, that stuff posts automatically. But even then, sometimes there's still a manual entry that needs to be done. This will dump in And, if you're making your car payment, or, you're sending it to the flower shop and it's under this bill, this invoice, whatever, when the payment is made, it's going to go to where it needs to go. And then, if for reconciliation purposes, it's going to be quick. It's automatically reconciled. And so that's where I think, if you're in accounting in any way, you know what I mean, you better start learning to sharpen up your skills, even understanding what these new systems are, because there's going to be a lot of implementation people that are going to be needed to understand what's happening, and kind of get the people that are stuck in the old ways to realize that, there's a new way that we're doing things. And, so there's an opportunity for folks that are in accounting as far as that goes. But, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Keda.
No, I was going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think, this is standardization, basically, of the language that's used in these transactions. So for that, because there is a standardization of it, as these transactions are going through, the language, any of these particular banks, institutions, or any of these, intermediaries that are utilizing these transactions will have the same standardized language. So because they would have that same standardized language, the transactions will not have as many fails, won't have as many issues. And because it's standardized, it will make it run faster. You know what I mean? The transactions will go faster. Does that mean that that's an issue necessarily for legacy banks? I think if they decide to get on the train, no, it won't, because they will still be on the same type of messaging standard as everything else. So when it comes down to it, do I think that legacy banking is going away? I don't think that it's necessarily going away, but what I am looking at is that it's going to have to move with the times. And if legacy banking is looking to still be a viable avenue for those that, feel they want to use it, then it would behoove them, you know what I mean? In order to, I don't even think that there's going to be anyone that's going to be able to transact if they're not using the ISO 20022 standard, and that's what's happening, as we're now seeing that all of that metadata that we were talking about is going to be able to be seen on these particular transactions. And so they may also be able to pull that information when it comes to whatever is associated with the account that's sending that transaction. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different nuances and things that are associated with ISO that a lot of times people just see the fact that, okay, now on Coinbase, they've got something that says something is ISO tokens, which is, for all intents and purposes, a misnomer or just a way to brand it, but it does show that there are projects out here that are looking to have that already built into their tokens, so that as these transactions come through, they're already set up to be able to receive those messages.
Well, it's the layer of which their tokens are moving on, or what they're using to move it. Two things. One, the ISO 2022 message standard that was due by the 22nd, which is where all these debates started coming about again. The fact of the matter is, many of the larger banks, they have already went over to the new messaging standard, and the due date for all of the other banks was 11/22/2025 that they needed to. So basically, banks that didn't get themselves aligned with it and start using it, they're gonna struggle because
You're basically amendment blocked.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna. So I mean, and so here's some other cool features I don't know if I would call it a feature. Here's some other cool facts that you might not know. And it's kind of a reiteration of what I said earlier. But the old Swift system only had 3 lines that you could put in the message to carry the payment. Now with the new standard, it can carry 100+ detailed fields, like who you're paying, why you're paying it, the invoice number, the tax information, everything, anything that you could need to put into it. There's a field for you to put it in. It's used for payments, securities, trade finance, reporting, basically anything that moves money, anything that has to do with moving money and digits around the world. This is the standard. It's also flexible, which is another piece of information I found, that countries can add their own local rules, but still speak the same core language. And so what the little tagline is, ISO 20022 is the new global dictionary and grammar book for money messages. And so, I think it's really important for people to understand that this has to do with the messaging and the movement of payments. It doesn't mean your token's going to go up in value. But here, the other thing is two things. Like Abdi, you had said that we really need to understand the debate on the word compliant. And I had another definition that I wanted to go over, which was an API. Because as you start researching this, you're going to come up with those words in a lot of the stuff that you're reading. And so one of the things that I realized that an API or an application are what's going to use this or what's going to move this. So an API is a set of rules and protocols that enable the communication between different software systems. It acts as a bridge that allows one application to request data or services from another. They don't have a user interface. Instead, they provide data or functionality programmatically. For instance, a weather API allows developers to fetch weather data for integration into their applications without building the weather data system themselves. Whereas an application is a user face interface, and it focuses on delivering a complete experience. So you've got APIs are system facing and focus on enabling integration and data exchange between systems. Like a web application would use an API to retrieve data from a server or interact with third-party services like payment gateways. So those two things. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. So when I was building my app, right, you have to come up, like I would be asked to go get the API from Twitter. Or when I was looking at recently, how do I give out my footprints token? So I look into, you can get the API for Twitter to look at certain handles. So you can, or Google, when I put my app on Google Play Store, there's an API there. So anytime that one system talks to another one, that's what Lady K was saying, like the plugin. It's the conversation that's happening between these two separate entities. And so if we take what your example is and you put it into like me building the app again, Wandering Home Directory, I would say that Wandering Home Directory would be the app. And then the API would be the whatever code is written to communicate with, let's say, the XRPL. And then the XRPL would be, the blockchain in the background doing its own thing, whatever. So, and then, did you want to say something, Lady K?
With the blockchain, it would be a node. The API is like between two applications or two websites or two software, right? But with the blockchain, it would be a node.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that's my interpretation. And that's my personal experience with APIs, is that they come with everything. So if you want anything to integrate with your thing, that's what you need. That's the language that you use. And then the compliancy thing, honestly, in my interpretation of this argument for 5 years, like you said, it just, will come back and it's just started again 2 years ago. This has been the argument, in my opinion, since the beginning of my experience with blockchain. Like everybody argues about this, and I just don't even engage in the conversation. So when this all was happening this week, I was like, oh no, we're going to talk about this. Because I think, what I've been noticing is that most people get hung up on semantics and, the words. Now, granted, I get it. All words have, meaning, and you have to be careful about your words, and that's super important. But what I am interpreting, I can't even say this word.
I know.
Interpreting? No, that's not right. Interpreting is that it's that word, and that really what we're looking at is the implementation of standards. So there's no compliancy. You don't have to comply. You can either implement or you don't have to implement, and you can use or you don't have to use. But see, in my situation, I've thought about that while you guys were talking. My first experience with working with large numbers was I was working for a foreign currency exchange company. And so I was a person who called out, asked companies if they were using foreign currency, and then we would compare the bank's price to the price we could give them. And so what I understood is that they had a bank account in Canada and a bank account in the United States. And so they would, if you decided to go with them, they would give you a lower rate than the bank, because they could they could give you any rate, really. They could give you a zero rate, based on the exchange, like no more, like higher than the actual exchange. And so what they would do is they would take your Canadian money and then they would just send the American money out from their bank account. And so when you're saying like the fall of the end of that old way, or like that banks have to like meet the standards, in my mind, it's a very similar thing where like if you're gonna, well, now you've said that like because it's on Swift, maybe this isn't the right interpretation, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But in my mind, it's like, okay, well, if you haven't acquired these standards, you can't even move money, let alone, somebody could do exactly what this company that I worked for did, and they could potentially use the blockchain and move it so much faster than any bank could ever if they're still on this old legged infrastructure. So, but at the same time, I mean, with the Swift definition, maybe I'm wrong, because now all Swift has to be not compliant, but implemented these standards.
Well, and what I'm wondering is if, and I don't know the answer to this actually, but what was popping in my head is exchanging money the same as payments? So
Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I don't know. Like,
That's the biggest problem with Swift, is that it's money, different currencies. That's what makes it so long. I mean, yes, we can look at like the bank, US bank to US bank, but the reason why Swift takes they say it takes a week to 3 weeks. If a shipping container or ship comes into port somewhere and they are taking goods from America, let's say, and they take it over to, let's say, Japan, and then it has to sit there, or let's just even say Canada for, posterity. So it leaves America, it comes to Canada, it's sitting in the port for 2 weeks because they're waiting for the Swift messaging service to verify that the money is the right money. And then when do you use the exchange rate? And what day is the exchange rate the right exchange rate? Because you have not only do you have the amount leaving the port, then you have the travel distance, then you have the arrival, then you have the processing, then you have the financial transaction across the border once the goods and services have actually arrived in the country. So in my interpretation,
don't get me
that's
started
why
on the shipping container part of the whole thing, because that's a whole nother animal right there. So
I always say cross currency instead of cross border, because that's what these payments are, right? Like with blockchain, I mean, it's really facilitating cross currency payments, And I want to go back to what you're talking about, Melissa, with the application, because the blockchains themselves can't send the ISO messages. They weren't set up to do that with the 222, right? Yep. But there can be an application in the middle that takes the transactions, flips it to a message with that standard and sends it off. And the best example of this is RippleNet. Ripple's RippleNet, which is not the XRP ledger, is their proprietary software that they send payments on, and it is ISO compliant, and since it's the bridge between, like, if they do a payment on the blockchain to sending the message on Swift type thing. So that is really the only way to facilitate it right now. It could change in the future. I'm not saying maybe one day somebody creates whatever, but right now that's the only way it can be done.
And it's my understanding, because I looked this up before, that RippleNet is not XRP Ledger. RippleNet is the entity, I guess, or I don't know what you would call it, platform, or I don't know, protocols.
It's a software.
It's their software. It's their software. So now when I looked it up, it said that they use APIs. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's either an API, which is an application programming interface, or it's an actual application. So the application, the difference is the application is a complete software program that's designed to perform specific tasks for end users. So it actually provides the user interface for interaction, such as web application access through a browser or a mobile app or on a smartphone. So a banking app would be an example that would allow you to check your balances and transfer money, view transactions, and all of that sort of thing. So it's just both of them, whether it's just an API or an actual application. That is the bridge. They both act as the bridge that allows the one application to request data or services from another. So, but the only difference is the APIs themselves don't have a user interface. Instead, they provide data or the functionality programmatically.
All I was trying to say with that one is just that it's our nodes that query the ledger. They would just have to have a node to go into the blockchain and query it. The blockchain isn't technically a software, right? So, and they have nodes, you know what I mean? And
so here, can I ask this question? Because I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So the nodes that they get the information from the blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know that the node itself would be the one that would be transmitting the payment. I think the API
The node
tap into the node or whatever, right?
The node would query the ledger.
Okay. The node queries the ledger. RippleNet is the one that takes it from the query, and then that is what goes to the end user for the payment or whatever. But it processes it. It goes through RippleNet. It processes it on the other end. And what people get confused is that RippleNet is what they built it to be compliant. They were forward thinking when they built it to be compliant with ISO 2022 standards. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Just a couple quick examples for those, just to really hammer it home. So here's a couple of real life examples regarding the API or and how it would actually work. So who needs to speak the ISO 20022 language? A bank's computer system. How are they actually going to do it? They're going to send the fancy ISO message to another bank, and then they're going to use the carrier is going to be an API or machine to machine. Another example was RippleNet to Santander. Ripple servers send the ISO message, and the carrier is the API that connects it to Santander. The crypto wallet to a bank, your wallet quietly sends the ISO message over, and the carrier is an API. Or a big corporate treasury app, they're going to send it. It's going to be sent through an API. So I guess like as we're talking about it more, it's like the bank itself, in order for them to be able to communicate with like RippleNet to Santander. So something is started using RippleNet. They want to send it to Santander. Their servers are going to send the actual message over, and perhaps Santander on the other end is going to use an API to actually read and talk with the RippleNet. Does that sound? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding.
No, you're making total sense. I mean, just think of it like, okay, you have the blockchain and it's coded with its own protocol and language and all that, right?
Yep.
You have Swift now on the ISO 20022 standard. You just have this middle person now in the middle that would have to connect it. RippleNet is the prime example. They're the only example I know of right now. If you got another one, drop it in the comments, please. I would love to know. But RippleNet can go into the blockchain through their nodes, query that, send payments there, and then they can formulate the message to Swift through an API, because both Swift and RippleNet are programmed software. That's the API. Yeah.
Nice. Before we move on, can we just talk we talked a little bit about compliant, but because that seems to be such a heated word that everyone gets pissed off about, I would just like to read the definitions and then chat about it for a hot second. And so there's two examples or two definitions. Compliant: inclined to agree with others or obey rules, especially to an excessive degree. And then the example would be a compliant labor force, or compliant with, meaning meeting or in accordance with rules or standards. Example: food that is compliant with safety regulations, policies compliant with federal legislation and regulations. There are standards compliant programs in place. So those are examples of when somebody is saying compliant, they're ISO 2022 compliant. And people are using it in general terms. They're saying XRP is ISO 2022 compliant, or, what is it? Cardano, or some of these other ones. They're saying, XLM is another one that they say that the token itself, the coin itself, is ISO 20022 compliant, and it's not actually the coin or the token, and that's where people get pissed. What do you guys think about just reading and breaking down the term compliant? Does that change your opinion or soften at all for somebody saying that Ripple is ISO 2022 compliant?
What are you guys saying?
If I'm not mistaken, I think the actual company itself can be ISO 2022 compliant, but because it's just a messaging standard. So I believe Ripple itself can be compliant, but the token itself isn't what can be compliant, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's the RippleNet, right?
Well, the RippleNet can definitely be compliant because it's utilizing the messaging standard. So if it's utilizing the messaging standard, then it is compliant, right?
So let's dive into this a little bit. Kristin, you had I can't see Kristin.
You know what? I was going to add this. Okay, the token cannot be compliant because the standard is a message. Mm-hmm. It's a message, not a token, right? So, okay. There is a standard called ISO 24165, and that is going to integrate within the Swift messaging system digital token identifiers. Okay, in the same way that it has a standard to identify securities, because you can send security, right? When you were going through that, you said payments, securities, all those. So eventually they're going to add the ability to add a digital token identifier in these messages. That's not even there right now. That's later.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like, I know that's what I want.
No, and that is exactly another reason why it's exciting. So so you have people that are overboard excited about ISO 20022, and it's gonna flip the switch and all of this kind of stuff, right? They're overlooking the details about what's actually being laid out here and what's happening. And you just mentioned something that's very important, because when it comes to fiat, and I can't remember if it's like 2416 or it's in my notes somewhere, and maybe it's the number you just read off, but the digital identifier, there's an identifier that is used for fiat, moving fiat around. It is in the works in the future, in the near future, to incorporate digital assets into that, cryptocurrency into that. And so all of these companies, and we're gonna touch on them, and gosh, we got 20 minutes. Holy smokes, this is going by fast. There are some companies that I would like to touch on that have placed themselves in, they're either exploring it, or they have already created the rails to be ISO 20022 compliant, which means I'm going to say compliant, because they are volunteering to follow a set of standards, right? They're going to comply with those standards. They're going to use those standards. They're going to practice those standards, whatever you want to call it. They have built their software, their messaging system to facilitate using that standard. So if you want to say comply, it's whatever. But there is no official ISO 20022 certification. And so that is where a lot of people say ISO 20022 certified. No, ISO does not certify anyone, banks or crypto. Being compliant simply means I built my system so it can send and receive these new detailed XML messages perfectly. Or it means I tested it with real banks and partners and it works. Or I published the proof, white papers, documents, live demos. Basically, at this point, it's self-declaration, real world proof, and there's still not a gold seal from ISO. So it's compliance is determined by the implementing entity based on adherence to the standard specifications, using tools like the ISO 20022 editor to validate message formats. So that would be like all of the people, the companies that have been testing this out, right? And several of them been testing it out for several years now, right?
So I have two things to say. So one, I think Lady K, your example of the emails, I think you should bring that up now. And then also Melissa did just mention, you guys mentioned it a few times before when you and Keda were talking, and then this is before we started the show. It was an acronym, and you were talking about the old banking, and I just thought maybe you guys could like bring that back up because it's a little confusing. But yeah.
Yeah. Kristin, do you remember that we were talking about the MT messages? You were talking about the legacy system, and definitely bring that up, because I think it's important, especially in this conversation. Because I'm sorry, go ahead, because it looked like you were about to say something.
Okay, so you said the email example, right? Are you talking about what email did for data?
Yeah.
Okay.
The compliance / standardization.
So when email came out, right? Email did not talk to each other. You couldn't send Google wasn't even there, but you could send like an AOL, email to Yahoo, right? And it wasn't until they became interoperable and you can send an email to anyone that it changed the way, data was moved. Data for the first time could be moved fast and for free, right? So we always say crypto blockchain is going to do the same for the financial system. It's going to allow value to be moved fast and for really cheap on the XRP network, like fractions of a penny, right?
Where they talk about the internet of value.
Exactly.
The internet of value.
Tying it to the ISO of the topic, the ISO standard 222 is simply just a protocol that's going to allow, Swift to send messages that are now not limited, but also structured so that everyone is speaking the same language.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely that has been a talking point that we've heard a lot for a long time now, the internet of value and moving money like we move information. And this is just another layer to that. And it's happening, and that's why it's exciting. And so, you folks out there that get frustrated over this conversation, don't poo-poo the excitement over it, because it is progress, right? It is progress. And it's just an indication that, not those of us that are in crypto, we know it's not going away. We know it's the future. But for those of you that are dipping your toe and starting to think like, is this going to go away? Is this a scam? Is this whatever? This is some real world information of progress that's heading towards the direction of full implementation and transformation of the financial system and the rails that the money is going to be moving on, right? And it opens up a lot of opportunities because we already have the peer-to-peer with being able for me to be able to send Opti or Keda or Lady K a payment directly wallet to wallet. Banks are catching up. Banks, in my opinion, have been held back because of the messaging, because they cannot interact with one another directly. And so this is going to open the door for them to be able to, you'll probably see cryptocurrencies offered at your bank at some point in the future as what, and you'll be able to pay or switch it, from fiat to crypto and all this kind of stuff. So
that's actually happening now. Do you know?
I know there's pilots, right?
Yeah, there's definitely progress. I mean, this has been going on for years. I had one of the young ladies that was in my Discord. She told me this was when I first got into it, and she was telling me she banked with Navy Federal, and Navy Federal, she had sent some, I think she had sent some XRP to her account, and they were able to take it, and they did switch it over to fiat for her. And this was done in the background. She didn't even ask them to do this. This is what was already in place for them. But that makes sense. That's also a government entity with Navy Federal. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
what's interesting, Keda, that you said that is that, and I tried to do it. So years ago, back in 2019, I think it's like UMAA or UMSA.
Oh, yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, right?
Yes.
Okay.
USMA.
Yes, USMA. I looked it up. It's a military bank, right? You have to be a military to open it up. They were one of the first banks that I found that actually were allowing Bitcoin. Okay. Yeah. And my boss, who was in the military, he had one of those accounts, and I thought I could get an account, and I couldn't because I was never in the military. But this is the thing. It's interesting, as I always see a lot of military people are involved in crypto. If you look around this space, there's a lot of military people. Yeah. And I half wonder if part of it is because they've been introduced in it via their traditional banking way sooner than the public. So I find that very interesting. But we have 15 minutes, and I did want to go through quickly I don't know. I'm stumbling for the word to say. Platform RippleNet is a is it a protocol? Is it
It's
a
a
software?
software.
Okay. So the software or blockchains that are using or have been working towards ISO 20022.
Oh wait, did you mean RippleNet? RippleNet is a software.
Yes. So RippleNet would be that is compliant or
Right.
forward thinking with the ISO standards, right? Well,
Yes.
there's I wanted to go over the few that already are, and they say the coins that run on the rails, right? Okay, so you just have to know that the coin, like XRP, is the token that can run on RippleNet, can run on those rails that can switch. So I guess that's where they're attaching the coin to it. And eventually, when they get to the cryptocurrency part with the what you said, that the DTI or the digital transfer identification, I think is what it is, right? The identifiers or whatever,
Digital
it'll
token
eventually.
identifiers. Mhm.
Yes. And so RippleNet is fully ISO 20022 compliant,
Yes.
because they support real messages. And I don't know, I'm not going to understand this, but it's like PAX.008, which is payment instruction. They're already using it with Santander, Standard Chartered, and hundreds of banks. Their partners like Volante Technologies and Temenos are certified FedNow providers, and they pull straight into RippleNet. And then we also have Stellar. It was built from the ground up for cross-border payments also. They have full ISO 20022 message support there, and it's used by IBM, WorldWire, and Real Remittance Corridors. So that is something that I want to dive into this IBM WorldWire at some point in the future. Also Metallicus, which is Metal Blockchain. They're an actual certified FedNow service provider as of October of 2024, and they are ISO 2022 ready. And so for those of you who don't know, they use XPR Proton. They're basically for credit unions. And so they have been focused on being compliant with the ISO standards also. I just found out that Cardano completed upgrades in 2025 and now are able to support the message format. So that is important to know. And then some other little notes I had: Algorand, Hedera, Quant, XDC, IOTA, all of them have published ISO 2022 support or live integrations. The notes I found that Quant's Overledger is literally designed as the universal translator. And what else? IOTA, they're the ones that are developing a blockchain for financial use cases. And
Aren't they the ones that, along with XDC, are tokenizing the stock market? Is it IOTA or is it Ondo for that?
I know IOTA. Well, my notes for IOTA, and I don't know a lot about them, but it'd be great for people to start looking these up. It says their alignment is for machine-to-machine payments and cross-border transactions.
Okay.
But they have a focus on Tangle technology that's adapting to the standardized messaging. And what else did I say? VeChain. VeChain is the one that's been working on supply chain finance solutions, and they have shown interest in ISO 20022 to integrate. But as far as I know, like full implementation on that is not done. And Solana also, they've been exploring financial applications, and they have some of their developers working on ISO 20022 compatibility. Polygon too. But again, there's no official certification for ISO standards. The compliance is self-reported, and they require the XML messaging support, interoperability testing, and documentation. So, I mean, the long
That
story
XML
is short.
thing.
Oh, the XML thing?
Yeah, that was what I was referring to before. I couldn't remember the acronym.
Oh, yeah.
What does that
Well,
stand for?
Yes.
So
So
I
where's
just wanted to also bring your attention. So for you to know, rolled up in the spot. Hey, for you to know. And I know that he had mentioned that the World Wire is no longer, and I think he was responding to something that you.
Oh, it's no. Oh, okay. Thank
It's no
you.
longer. I believe that he was saying it's no longer compliant.
Okay.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was the thing, and right before here, because again, these some of my notes were from July.
Mhm.
When I
So much
started, like,
changes so fast, right?
right.
Oh my
I'm still
goodness.
trying to find.
And just to answer Opti's question, XML, it's not code. It's like a protocol, like HTML. That's code though, but it's not code. It's like how do you explain it?
I'm trying to
Let's
find it.
see.
I have, I had somewhere in my notes, and I
It's
can't find it.
a markup language is what they call it. Markup language. Okay, so it is similar to HTML. It's a markup
Okay.
language.
All right. There was something I really wanted to throw a little nugget out there, and I'm trying to find my note, and I can't find it.
Before
Darn
we go
it.
any further, too, I want to thank the 212 people that are in here hanging out with us this evening. Thank you so much for being here for this conversation with the ladies. We always enjoy having you here. Also know that we also will have our after space at 10:10 Eastern Standard Time on X, where we can bring everyone into the conversation. We're getting some great comments in our comment section. For you to know came back with this comment. He says IBM's WorldWire has been faded out. Stellar Stronghold has mentioned this. So
Oh,
that
I
you know.
appreciate the update on that. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you for that.
it's one of those things where you start researching something and you're like, oh, I should do a show on this, or we should talk about this, and then stuff changes so often.
Yes, it
And
does.
so for those of you that are thinking about this, just start asking any of these AIs, or you can search on the internet, start pulling up different articles when it comes to this kind of stuff. Maybe stay away from anybody that is screaming something from the rooftop and telling you that you're going to make a lot of money. I just tend to try to stay away from those people in general, right? It's this is not going to happen overnight. All of this stuff's not going to happen overnight. I guess it's simply exciting for someone like myself, who's been following this stuff for so many years, that, a couple of years ago, when we're like, oh, it's going to happen, and then when it finally does happen, we're like, yes, it's happening. I wasn't crazy, because, several years ago, a lot of this stuff was all speculation. And now, because it's known stuff that's out, people are like, oh, it's no big deal. It's nothing. But in fact, it really is something, right? It is going to change the way that money and payments move around the world. And it's going to affect some people's jobs, I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but I mean, these types of movements are a big deal. And, everything has to happen as it needs to. You have to have that foundation. And this is a big, huge step where, you have that list and you got to check it off. I did this, and I did this, and I did this, till we can get to the end. Any final thoughts, ladies? Let's go around the room and give us your take.
I'm looking forward to our after space because I got lots more questions, and there's so many things here. It's hard, it's complicated, and I think that we did a good job on sort of weaving our way. I think when you started listing off like all of these other ones, and then you were like ready and available, and I was like, yes, these are all the words. Like the people who get hung up on the semantics, I get it, but ultimately I think it scares people off from having these conversations when you're worried about all the saying the wrong word. And so I think ultimately You know, if you want to create an environment where you are encouraging people to get involved with, you know, the knowledge base, giving people a little bit of grace in the fact that like they might not say exactly the word that you expect them to say, and that it's okay, and that these are the conversations that allow for that broader view. And who knows, in 10 years, we might be saying a whole different word, you know, and we'll be looking back on this time.
Exactly. Lady K.
We don't need Swift.
Love it.
We can still be bullish. We got a lot to be bullish about.
Amen. Yeah, we don't. Keda,
Wow.
Keda.
This has been a topic that's been talked about quite a bit, and you know, I kind of talked about it in one of my morning videos that I do, and you know, just really having a little bit, you know, more of a clearer thought process when it comes to just this whole, you know, ecosystem, you know, and you know, not giving yourself false hope and false, you know, false thought processes. You know, at the end of the day, a messaging standard is just that. It's a messaging standard. And the beauty of it is, yes, it does help facilitate transactions, but it is just that, a messaging standard. So I'm excited to see how things work out, how it improves things, how it improves, you know, transactions, the speed, as well as the efficiency of those transactions. Yes, and don't forget to come and hang out with us in our after space so we can talk more about this and really kind of get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, that'll be fun. You know, guys, I think it's so funny. Even that we're talking about this, about the, you know, you're like, at the end of the day, it's just a messaging standard, or the banking people, or, you know, there's so many people that got, that are popular, that everybody listens to, or even coders and, you know, computer tech guys that, you know, they used to maybe label themselves as like, I'm just a computer nerd, or, you know, whatever. These guys are like the heroes of the hour right now, right? All of these people, you know, somebody talking about accounting is, you know, like, oh, geez, this person again, right? And so it's just really interesting and funny to me that we are talking about a messaging standard because it's not something that you would normally think would be very sexy to talk about. But it is kind of a big deal. It is kind of a big deal, and it is an indication that we're moving in the right direction. And so, yeah. I hope everybody joins us in the after space. There's a lot of stuff going on this evening, but it sure would be awesome if you did. Please come back and see us next week, every Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Digital Ladies Unscripted. Ladies, thank you so much. I appreciate you all. And don't forget Dip a Toe. Don't forget Dip a Toe on Wednesday. Yep. You guys have a good night. Thanks so much.
Digital ladies breaking the chain, rising in crypto, we're changing the game. Crypto frontier, we're claiming our space. Not your keys, not your crypto, know your place. Unscripted, we're bold, we're free. Melissa, Keda, Lady K, and Auntie Digital, come ride this wave. Digital wealth, we're here to pay.
Crypto nights, we're lighting a spark. As we ignite now, we're setting the mark.
Safety first, we're keeping it tight. Blockchain power, we're shining the light. Unscripted, we're bold, we're free. Melissa, Keda.